This is the same hotel where 45 years ago there was an attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan. And I believe since then, the hotel has been further fortified, and it's deliberately actually intended for presidents to be able to give speeches there at this dinner and other occasions. I myself certainly had to show my ticket several times to get in and pass through metal detectors and that kind of security. But certainly tonight there are questions being asked about just how secure was that hotel. Certainly some reports that the alleged offender here was staying as a guest at the hotel, and that's always something complicated for the organizers. But as is normal, we filed into that very cavernous ballroom. About 2,000 guests were sitting at tables, still on the first course. There'd been a brief introduction, a national anthem. Donald Trump was up there on stage, and then I think it was 8:36 p.m. when there was a loud noise at the back. It sounded like a bang or multiple bangs, not entirely easy to tell. General commotion and confusion, and I saw guests in tuxedos and women in ball gowns diving under tables. I did likewise. There was a kind of eerie silence. We saw Secret Service officers rushing through, some shouts of get down and stay down. Really a great deal of uncertainty. And by the time I rose again to look what was going on, Donald and Melania Trump had been rushed off stage. I saw armed officers there wielding weapons. And then just several minutes of total confusion. It was very hard to know what had happened. There was a very gradual sense that perhaps the danger had passed, and indeed, as time went on, guests again began talking amongst themselves. I went to close to where this incident happened, spoke to some journalists there. One said he'd heard 5 gunshots, another said he'd heard 4 gunshots. It was impossible for them to actually see anything, but they certainly heard that noise. They said people were terrified and frightened, and I witnessed that myself. And then, as you know, for a while it looked like perhaps the dinner would resume, but protocol dictated that would not be the case. And eventually we filed out outside the hotel. There were lots of emergency vehicles, and then, of course, Donald Trump held that briefing at the White House.
And David, we don't know for sure that Donald Trump was the target. It could have also been journalists, but the US president has been targeted by multiple assassination attempts in the past.
That's right. And I noted one of the reporters at the briefing asked him, why does this keep happening to you? And Trump cited Abraham Lincoln, of course, assassinated in the 19th century, and said basically presidents who do big, important, consequential things are often the targets of this. And I think for a lot of people, there were some reporters there tonight who had been at the campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, when Trump was targeted. On that occasion, of course, he quickly rose from the floor, bloodied, lifted his fist, chanted "Fight, fight, fight." It produced some extraordinary photography. I think it was very galvanizing for his supporters. Tonight, I have to say, I suspected he might try to do the same. And even some of his harshest critics in that room might have been charmed by that sense of solidarity that this dinner is going ahead. And we may still get a flavour of that when the dinner eventually happens. But yes, there was Butler, Pennsylvania. Of course, there was another attempted assassination in Florida. Trump himself says this has become a very dangerous job. But I think what perhaps he doesn't give is a wider context that some of his critics would point out that Trump himself, some of his allies, have arguably encouraged a culture of polarization, of violence in America, a country that, of course, that is awash with guns. And just in recent years, we've seen congressional baseball practice targeted by a gunman. We've seen killings of state officials. We've seen the killing of Charlie Kirk, a conservative activist and Trump supporter. There is a pervasive and dark and dangerous climate of political violence in the United States, and sadly, here we are again.